This is the exact setup that you will learn to make in the next hour. So if I show you the kind of theme switcher that we're going to implement, this is a Matugen based one. And as you can see over here, it looks pretty sweet. Now I can also switch to this theme and also this one, right? If you can find it, yep, there you go. This is the kind of setup that I'm going to teach you how to make in the next hour. So I will literally be teaching you how to do this step by step, which means that it doesn't matter even if you're a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced user. You'll be able to follow this guide just fine, right? Now, just a warning and a disclaimer, right? If you can't sit down for the next hour and just follow step-by-step instructions of click here, do this, type this, you have no hope of actually ever getting a setup that you like. So don't be that guy, don't be that girl, don't be that person, okay? Just close all your other tabs, focus, and get it done. Get this kind of setup done so that you can go about your day and use your setup just as you want to, okay? Ready? Close everything else? Okay, let's dive in. As always, we start by removing this auto-generated config warning. So let's open the terminal, open the Hyperland config, and let's get cracking. So remove that and remove this part. Then change the scale to 1. Now what that's going to do is basically reduce the size of all elements that you see on screen and make it just 1 times and not magnify it as much as it was before. Okay, that, and let's change a couple of the keybinds before we get started. Okay, so binds should be somewhere over here. Okay, there it is. And if you're using Kitty as your terminal, you can press Ctrl-Shift+ or Ctrl-Shift- in order to zoom in or zoom out without changing the entire config itself. Okay, so main mod Q, let's just make that return, or even enter should work. Then this should be W. Okay, and let's just change main mod itself to alt. Great, now it works, and that's pretty much everything we need. Next is to just change the menu key like so, and we're done. Great. Now, to actually get started, first of all, we need a wallpaper. So here are the things that we're going to do, right? We're going to have to get a wallpaper, then we're going to need Waybar, and then App Launcher, and Matugen. Matugen in order to tie this entire setup together. That's really what brings the setup to life and then gives it all the color that you saw previously. This setup is just, it wouldn't be what it is without Matugen, right? So let's get started. I have downloaded a couple of wallpapers already over here. Now, if I go to downloads, or rather in pictures, wallpapers, this directory you're going to have to create yourself, by the way, okay? Go to pictures, wallpapers, create a walls directory wherever you want to, and then download 3 of your favorite wallpapers. You can download how many ever wallpapers you want. There is, of course, no limitation to that. Here I have downloaded 3 wallpapers, which would seemingly fit the Linux rice aesthetic, okay? I don't think these are wallpapers I would use every single day, but regardless, they fit the aesthetic and they look pretty cool. So these are the wallpapers that we're going to be making Matugen use. Great, you can download a bunch of more wallpapers using Wallhaven. Otherwise, you can just look for minimalist wallpapers through your favorite search engine, okay? Now, let's see what we can do. Let's open the browser. I'm going to be using Brave for this. Here it wants to ask for a keyring. Let's just deny that, okay? Now, what we have to do is let's go over to Waybar's wiki because we need to configure some things first. Okay, so we have the wallpapers. Next thing, we'll just get Waybar up and running. Okay, then we'll install the wallpapers and then we'll configure Matugen. So let's go to github.com, Alexei's Waybar wiki. Okay, so we'll have this page open. And you know what? This might actually look a little bit small for you on your screen, so I'm going to do you a favor, right? And I will increase the scale so you can see it better. Okay? Yes, I know. I help you out a lot. Thank you very much. Okay, there it is. Now you can see things much clearer and you don't have to squint. Awesome. Okay, let's quit out of this and let's see what we get. Let's also go to Matugen's wiki, so that would be github.com, INIOX, Matugen. So if we go here, as you can see, it's a material U color generation tool, right? So this is what we're going to be using in order to theme the various aspects of our system. from the app launcher, which is going to be Rofi in this case. It's Wafi right now, but we'll change it to the status bar, which is going to be Waybar. Okay, great. Now let's go back and let's see here. This is the description and everything. Awesome. Let's get Waybar. So let's just type in yay-s. Let's see if yay is here. Okay, yay works. So yay-s, Waybar. Okay, then Matugen-bin. However, there's probably going to be, hold on, let's just quit this. Now, if you're using chaotic AOR, there's going to be a variant of Matugen where you don't have to actually compile it on your own. So if you see here, okay, Matugen bin is already installed. I've installed it before. Okay, same thing goes for Waybar. So install Waybar, Rofi, and Matugen bin. So those three applications are what we're going to need, along with SWWW, of course. Solution to our Wayland wallpaper woes. Okay, now that we have that, we have to just go over to the config and auto start it. So config hyperland.conf. Let's see, there should be an auto start section where we're going to exec once Waybar. Okay, and we'll delete the rest of this. Now, next time we log out and log back into Hyperland, we're going to see Waybar. But we don't actually have to do that. All we have to do is type in Waybar ampersand disown. Okay, now this is one way in which you can send any app, okay, disconnect any app from the terminal and send it to the background. There's a couple of different ways you can do this, right? If you want to be able to still use your shell, just using the ampersand is good enough, but then when you quit out of your terminal, the process is going to die. If you don't want that, you can use the setsid command. So setsid, and then you can say Waybar ampersand. What that does is disconnects the process from the terminal, and so I can close the terminal and then it still survives. If I type in kill or pkill Waybar, right? Pkill Waybar, Waybar dies. Okay, that error, you're not going to get that error, don't worry, it's just running on a different user. Okay, anyway, let's see. There's another way in which you can send Waybar to the background, which is using disown, right? So Waybar ampersand disown does the same thing, except you don't have to use those. What was that? Setsid command. Great. Now we have Waybar up and running. We're going to have to change the workspaces. We're going to have to add in different workspaces. And then let's see what else we have to do. Get a wallpaper and make Matugen fit in with the rest of it, right? And that is exactly what we're going to do. So let's go over to Waybar's wiki. And let's see here. So let's go to config Waybar. We don't have a directory, so we have to create that. Config Waybar, create the directory, and cd into there. Great. Now, let's see here. Let's go to configuration and then copy the base config. Base config, starter config is here. But what we want is the minimal example config. So we just go to the bottom of the page, and this is what we see. We can layer on whatever modules that we want to on our own. So config.jsonc. And by the way, there's a difference between regular JSON and JSON-C, okay? JSON-C is JSON with comments. However, if you don't want comments, JSON usually doesn't support it. So if you want comments, make sure that the config file is config.jsonc. You can, of course, omit the entire extension, but if you want the file to actually be recognized by your file manager, let's say you're using Dolphin or Thunar or Nautilus or whichever one, okay? All of those are file managers, by the way. They're just different names for apps that are basically file managers, right? You can add in this extension. So let's create the file, zoom in over here, and then let's put this like so. Great. Now we have to get rid of a bunch of the modules that are related to Sway because they're not useful for us, okay? And we just have to start configuring. Now, there is one more file that we have to create. Now, we have to create a scripts directory, and then inside of that scripts directory, we're going to have to do this. So we need a launch.sh script. The reason why is because we have to reload our Waybar config, right? Every single time we make a change, we're going to have to reload the config in order to see the changes. In order to do that, we need a way in order to interact with the bar itself, okay? In order to get the bar to reload. Now for that, we're going to be using this launch.sh script. So we'll just add in a shebang, bin bash, okay? We're using bash as the shell over here. Now what we're going to do is pretty simple. We'll just kill all -9 Waybar, and then type in Waybar ampersand. So every single time we launch this script, all it's going to do is just kill Waybar and restart it. there's a couple of different options we can do. Let's say we were perhaps, a bit ambitious and wanted to use a bunch of different Waybar themes, as I've done in one of my previous setups, right? What you type in here is not just Waybar ampersand, but Waybar dash dash config or Waybar dash C, something like config Waybar, or yeah, config Waybar themes, something like ultra minimal. Okay, let's say that was an example theme name. And then it could be something like config.jsonc, and then dash s would be the same path, so config Waybar themes ultra minimal style.css, right? We could do this. However, we're not actually doing this right now because we're just going to be dealing with one Waybar theme, okay? And by the way, if you want to know how to actually make Waybar themes that are, different and then switch between them every single time, and also learn how to make a custom theme switcher, not just one that depends on your wallpaper, but then ones with, all the popular themes that you like, something like Rose Pine, and then Night Fox, and what else do we have? We have Nord. If you want to know how to make a custom theme switcher like that, with all your themes, as well as blend it in with the one where it fits with your wallpaper, there's a link in the description, right? First link in the description. Go ahead, click that, check it out, and that should be able to help you out. Okay, now let's get back to this. This is going to just be Waybar ampersand. And by the way, here's another cool thing that you should know. Whenever you're editing files in Linux, it's usually customary and just good practice to leave a blank line at the end of the file, because whenever you're appending something, let's say you're appending stuff using echo, right? It's a bit of a distraction, but it's good for you to know, right? Don't worry about it. So when you're echoing something like hello to config Waybar config.jsonc, this is the wrong file, but regardless, if you don't leave a blank line at the end of the file, chances are what's going to happen is it's not going to shift to a new line. The cursor will not shift to a new line, and instead what's going to happen is the line will just be outputted over here, and then that's going to lead to all kinds of breakage. So in order to avoid that, just put in a blank line at the end of your files, and then you should be good to go. Great. Now we have set that up. Let's see what else we have to do. Of course, you need to make sure that the script is executable. Now we have to create a bind inside of Hyperland's config itself. Okay, so config hyperland.conf. Look at binds. Here it is. Now we're going to add a bind which is mod key and r. So bind equals $main mod r, and that's going to execute a script. So execute, right? Config Waybar scripts launch.sh. Now, if it works correctly, yep, it should basically reload the bar and then give us this, which is awesome. Perfect. This is exactly what we're looking for. Now the bar looks a little bit plain and then has literally nothing on it except two modules, okay? And it's missing one of the core modules, which is workspaces. But not to worry, because we're going to get this fixed in probably the next 5 minutes. It doesn't take too long at all, okay? Now, let's step back, and we need to create a style.css file. Let's go over to styling, go back, and there should be styling over here. Click on this styling link, scroll down, and then here we should have a minimal style.css file. So just copy that, put it over in style.css, paste that in. Okay, and great. Now if you reload, we're still seeing the same thing because it's the same style sheet. No problem. Now we're going to add a bunch of different modules. So here we only have two modules, which of course are not working, but no problem. We'll just get Hyperland. We'll click on Hyperland over here. And then let's see, get Hyperland workspaces. So scroll down, should be able to find workspaces over here. Yep, example, hold on. That's window count and something a little bit different, but we should be able to find Hyperland workspaces over here. Hold up. Let's see. Okay, there it is. Persistent workspaces example. Persistent workspaces are a little bit different, right? Instead of having just one workspace, which is the workspace that you're currently on, and then having the workspace in which a window is contained, shown over here, you can have a bunch of different workspaces, let's say 1 through 5 or 1 through 7 or even 1 through 10, displayed over here by default. Let's add that in. So Hyperland/workspaces, put that in over there, like so, and then just paste this. Now here the tab's actually a bit broken, so let's use VS Codium to edit this instead. Close this. Okay, it seems to be running in Wayland, so let's not deal with it that way. Let's open VS Codium on Wayland, and there we go. Text rendering is much sharper, and it's great. So let's go over to config.jsonc. There it is. Awesome. Now, we have the workspaces, and we've put them in like so. Save the file, reload, there you go. You have your workspaces. Now, you can delete these icons over here, and then just make sure that all you see is the name. You can get rid of name and then the icon, and then just have the workspace name, okay? Which makes it look much cleaner. Okay, instantly, just instantly, okay? Let's get rid of this, and then 5 workspaces should be enough. Great. Then let's also get the window title. Should see title somewhere here, right? Title, let's see. Yeah, so it's Hyperland/window. Let's look at this. So we'll copy this and then paste it in over here. And by the way, if you're wondering why I'm actually stepping through the entirety of the process, it's because you have to actually learn how to start making setups like these. Okay, I am not necessarily doing you justice by just showing you the final setup and then asking you to click a bunch of buttons. I have to show you the underlying thought process that actually goes into making a setup like this. So here, what I'm doing is basically designing a complete setup from scratch so that you can see exactly what's going on behind the scenes. Not something that you can get in every single YouTube video. And if you want more content like this, right? If you want to know more stuff about my exact thought process behind how I rice and behind the actual configuration that's done step by step, you can go ahead and click the first link in the description. I show you exactly how to do this on a much more detailed level than I can put into a YouTube video, right? And not to mention, there's also a bunch more useful stuff that you'll find over there, so go ahead, click it, and check it out. Okay, now, Hyperland window, that should be pretty cool. Let's close this, and then type in Hyperland/window, right, and then reload. Ta-da! It works. Great. Now let's close this, reload. Awesome. So we have these modules working. What other essential modules could we need? We'd probably need network and then volume. That's it. Just two more modules, and then we're done. So let's look for pulse audio. Just click on pulse audio over here. Here it is. We should find an example config down here. Copy that, paste it over here. Of course, format. Then, let's see. Reload, and here it doesn't work because we have to, of course, pass it in. So modules right. This is going to include pulse audio. Pulse audio. Okay, then reload, and there you go. That works. Now, it looks a little bit off because the icons are not quite what you want them to be, but that's no problem. And you know what? Let me actually show you the icons properly. So let's make this a nerd font. JetBrains mono, nerd font. Okay. Now you should be able to see it properly. Yes, you are. In case it seems a little bit buggy, all we can do is just open this through the terminal. Okay, pulse audio. Then we need network. So let's look for network. Click on this link. Scroll down, and you should find another example config. So copy the example, come in over here, comma, boom, paste, Control-Shift-I, and then the network interface. So this one's actually really important when it comes to the network module, because if you don't get the interface right, what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to see the network name properly. Okay, the network module is basically not going to work. So if you type in IP-C space A, you should see your network name over here. I see WLO1, that is perfect. So that is my network interface that I'm going to use. Great. Now if I reload, I should see the network name show up. Of course, not unless I actually add it in. So network network. Okay, then a comma, reload. There you go. Now you see the network. You can just get rid of the signal strength by doing that. And then you should be good. Ethernet disconnected. Great. Awesome. That's the icon, and it's a bit smushed together, but that's no problem. We'll fix that with the style sheet. Now let's go into style.css and let's remove all of this stuff. We don't need the battery to be blinking, so we can get rid of that. And there is no mode, there is no clock, there's nothing. Get rid of that as well. And workspaces, okay, fine, that's good enough. Great, then for the tooltip, all that's fine. Now, here, for the font family, there are a couple of ways that you can go about using fonts over here, okay? You can either choose it to be a sans serif font or a monospaced font. The font that you're seeing over here, JetBrains Mono, is a monospaced font. It's also a fixed width font. They're all the same thing, which basically means every single character is the same width. However, if you look at this font, okay, this is a sans serif font and every single character is not the same width. So it depends on what kind of aesthetic you're trying to go for. In this case, I'm going to be using SF Pro Display. This font is a sans serif font, and as you can see, it instantly makes it look better and more professional, a little bit macOS-like, if you will. And for the font size, you can use a couple of different units. You can either use pixels, or you can use this. You can use rem. So you can use rem, which is relative EM, and that scales depending on your display size. So 1 rem on 2x scale is going to look a little bit different compared to 1 rem on probably 3x scale if you have a really, really large display. Okay, so if I make it 2 rem, just to show you, it increases the size to much, much more. So 1.1 rem or even 1.2 rem should be good enough, right? Now, in order to make things easier and clearer for you to see, I'll keep it at 1.1 rem. Min height is 0. If you don't want that, you can get rid of that. Okay, now the background, of course, gotta get rid of the border bottom. Ta-da! And then you have to add a bunch of padding to all of these modules. So let's get rid of this. To these 4 modules. So clock, and then battery, and then let's see, volume, which is going to be pulse audio. And then let's see, for network, we need to add some padding. So padding is going to be 10 pixels, let's say. Reload, and now we see 10 pixels of padding. We can give it a background color of something like 121212. That's material black, so we see that. But to make it clearer, let's make it E8 EAED. Okay, great. Now we see it a little better. Color then should be 121212. Awesome. Now we see it. Let's actually reduce the font size a little bit, make it 1 rem. Awesome. And great. Now, what else do we have to do? So we have all the modules that we're going to need. Awesome. That's great. What else can we need? That's it. Now we just have to add in a bunch of color and then the wallpaper itself, of course. Great. Also, note, if you're using a sans serif font like this and you're using nerd fonts, what you have to do is add in the appropriate font. So there is no font awesome being used here. However, if I add in JetBrains Mono Nerd font as a fallback, should fix it. Should fix it. However, if it doesn't fix it, they use OTF font awesome. So let's see if I have that installed. -ss OTF font awesome. Okay, it's not there, but you can just install it with OTF font awesome. Install it that way. Do that. And then if you reload, should work, but regardless, font awesome. Okay, so here it is. Here it is. Figuring it out and troubleshooting stuff is the most fun part about Rising, right? Now I'm showing you the live process that I actually use to troubleshoot stuff when it doesn't quite go the way it's supposed to. Okay, now what we're doing is just looking for the actual font name that we have to put in over here. So font awesome. Here, we're supposed to see it properly. 7 brands regular. Okay, let's see if that's actually the font name. If it's not the font name, no worries. We can fix it pretty quickly. So 7 brands. No, it doesn't work. Regardless, we're just going to be using a nerd font and then replacing it later on if we have to. JetBrains mono nerd font. Right, quit. Okay, great. Let's see. Okay, now let's put on a wallpaper over here and then get some colors. So for the wallpaper, we're going to be using swww. Make sure that the daemon or the demon is started. Okay, you always want the demon running in the background, right? You always want the demon chasing after you. Totally, right? So let's go over to auto start right here. Waybar. We also need the demon. So swww demon, except the demon in this case is actually a good one. Let's start the demon. Okay, here it doesn't do anything, but type in ampersand disown. Okay, we've disowned it. Now we just have to type in a command swww img pictures wallpapers and then pick any random wallpaper from here. QZW3, let's say. And then it changes the wallpaper. This is what we see. Great. Now, let's say we wanted to pick the last wallpaper, which would be something like this one. The YXZ. Of course, get rid of that. There you go. Slowly fades it in, right? And now we have the wallpaper. We quit, still remains, which is good. Now let's get rid of the background. We don't need a transparent background, so we'll make sure the background is actually a solid color. And over here, the text as well is the variant of white that I chose. Looks very good already, right? It looks pretty good. Now, let's do this. Time to implement Matugen. So we have Matugen's wiki over here. All we have to do is just go over to their themes repo. So it's Matugen-themes. And then look at a bunch of templates that they have. So they have a lot of templates for Hyperland, Waybar, GTK, which we're going to use, and Rofi, right? So, okay. A little bit more stuff to do. So let's keep going. What do we have to do now? Wallpaper set. We have to configure Matugen itself. So let's go to config, and then let's create a directory called Matugen. And let's go here and hold up. Copy this, go back. Okay, here's how Matugen actually works. So what you're supposed to do is create a config.toml file. You have to cd into the Matugen folder, then create a config.toml file. Once you've created this file, you need to copy the proper config over, right? So let's say I'm using the Hyperland colors.conf config template, and you have to just paste that in over here. Now, a template file looks a little something like this. So let's go to templates, and then we should see Hyperland over here, Hyperland, right? This is what you see. So this is the image, and then for every single color name, okay, it's best if I just show you. It's actually best if I just show it to you, right? So the input path is going to be the path to the template, which is going to be config hyper, or rather config Matugen templates. What's this called? It's called Hyperland colors.conf. That's what it is, right? Then output path is going to be config hyper colors. We'll make that a separate folder, and then we'll call it colors.conf. Then post hook, we're just going to run hyperctl reload. This is not actually required in terms of Hyperland. We don't need this post hook, so let's only keep what we need and get rid of that hook. Now config wallpaper, something like that. Wallpaper equals true, or let's see, it should be config line there. Okay, hold up. Okay, so let's go over to this link, which is Matugen example config.toml, and we have to add in this section for the wallpaper so that we can automate wallpaper switching as well. Okay, put that in over here. Wallpaper set true. We'll set it to false for now because we need to manually control the wallpaper. Otherwise, this is what the wallpaper switching is going to be dealt with like. Great. Now let's go to Hyperland templates. This is the template that we need. Click on download raw file. And you want to put this inside of .config and Matugen create a new folder, call it templates, put that in over there, hyperlandcolors.conf. Save it. Then we're also going to need it for kitty. So if we find kitty colors somewhere here, kittycolors.conf, save the same template in the same directory, save it over there. And of course, we have to add in the template section for kitty as well. So paste this here, templates.kitty. Input path is going to be kittycolors.conf. And then output path is going to be config kitty colors.conf. That's going to be a bit of a constant, as you'll see. And then we're going to need it for Rofi as well. Get it for Rofi colors.rofi. Download. Put it over there inside templates. And let's see, what else? We're going to need it for Waybar too. Okay, so that would be colors.css. So if there's any app that uses CSS in order to theme colors, this is going to be the template file that you'll use. See, clump CSS templates into one. So this was a commit that was made last year. So you can download this and put it inside colors.css. Like so. Then you want to copy this, paste it again and again for Rofi, as well as this itself, as well as Waybar. So input path for Waybar is going to be Waybar colors, or actually just colors.css, colors.css. Output path config Waybar colors.conf, colors.css actually, colors.css. And for Rofi, it's going to be config Matugen templates. Okay, Rofi-colors, Rofi colors.rofi. Then output path is going to be config Rofi colors.conf. Actually, colors.rofi. Great. Now we have it for these 4 apps. All we have to do is just wire it up. Great. Now, have to add in an import section is over here. So at import, okay, we're going to be importing this file, colors dot. Okay, you know what? Let's actually remove the intermediary step. You don't need a separate folder. We'll just get rid of this. So we'll get rid of the colors folder. So we can just do it this way. Less steps. That way it's better. So you can import colors.css. Put a semicolon after this. Then let's see. Config Waybar colors.css. Now what do we have to do? Okay. We can use the colors now. Just have to go over to background and change that to something like at background. Write the changes, then run Matugen itself. So Matugen, let's see, that's going to be pictures, Matugen image, pictures, then wallpapers, Wallhaven, QZW, or whatever, whatever these names are. Okay. Now, if we click here, should see a colors.css. And these are all the colors that we can be using inside of our configs. So if I reload, it should work. Okay, let's take a look at the colors again. Okay, at background, 101418. Now to actually make sure that that's the background color, let's use Hyperpicker and find the color, which indeed it is 101418. Perfect. So we know that the colors are working, so that's amazing, right? Let's quit this, put this over here. Great. Now we have to just wire up the colors properly. So color is going to be at on_surface. We look at the colors, on surface should be the text color, because the surface is the background and then on surface is going to be on the surface, which is the background. Makes sense, right? It's the text color. Great. Then tooltip, we can let that be. However, there should be a tooltip color over here as well. So if we look for tooltip, there is no tooltip. So we can use on primary fixed or on secondary, container surfaces, of course, that's going to be background as well. So a lot of figuring out the colors from this file just has to be a little bit intuitive. Okay, if you have not done any sort of, color figuring out before, it might take a little bit of experience getting used to, but otherwise it's pretty simple, right? Surface is going to be background. That's something you can remember. Secondary, scrim is just complete black almost always. Secondary is going to be a secondary color. There's a chart in Matugen's wiki, I'm pretty sure, of all the different colors that they have. Otherwise, you can just ask AI, your favorite AI model, what each of these colors is supposed to mean and where it's actually used. Great. Now, for tooltip, again, background, what do we make that? Background, come on. Let's see. We can just leave that be add background. No problem. Add background. And border, if you really want the border, you can keep it. And tooltip color, this is going to be at on_surface. Ta-da. And for these ones, let's say the background color would be something like primary. Reload, and this is the primary color. So primary is extracted from most of the color over here, and then you just paste that in over there. Great. Now, as for padding and margin, we need to add a little bit of margin, right? So let's add 10 pixels of margin. It's going to add 10 pixels of margin like so. You can reduce the padding. This is what you see. You can increase padding to the left and right, but then keep it normal on the top and bottom. So padding, 5 pixels. It's top, right, bottom, left for the shorthand. So top, right. So top and bottom, let's let that be 5 pixels. For the left and right, we can set it to auto, or probably that doesn't work, so we can make it something like 15 pixels. Reload, and this is what you see, 15 pixels. If the icon placement looks a little bit weird, which it actually is right now, like extremely weird because it's not supposed to look this way at all, there is a way to fix it. Again, we just have to get the nerd fonts working properly, which we will do a little bit later on, okay? Yes, we'll do that a little bit later. Until then, let's get the colors working properly first so that we can figure out what else we can do. Let's switch out the layout a little bit. So we'll put workspaces in the center. Or you know what? We'll keep it at the left. We'll just shift the clock over to the left. So shift the clock over here. Delete this. Okay, awesome. Let's see, is there anything else? Let's actually change the background to something like on surface to make it a little bit easier to see as we're dealing with the bot. Okay, now makes things much, much clearer, right? Great. We need to actually reduce the height of this bar. Otherwise, it's just going to be a bit too big. So make min height to be 0. That works. It's perfect. Let's reduce margin from 10 pixels. Let's get rid of it first. Now here is where a lot of the stuff, basically, the troubleshooting and the trial and error begins. Because in order to figure out how much margin you have to actually give in order to not make the bar look too thick, but then still have to press down on the modules enough to seem like they're individual modules, it's a little bit of work. But once you actually get it done, it's super satisfying. So all we need is just 2 pixels of margin around there. We need to create a little bit of separation. That's it. You can add a border radius as well, a border radius to get that pill shape, 100 pixels, giving you that pill shape, right? Awesome, fantastic pill shape. Of course, we all love that. And then let's see. Another thing that we can do is just completely get rid of the background itself. That way we don't have to deal with positioning it properly. Okay, so we can actually do that. Background, we can make it transparent. Transparent background, and there you go. You don't have to deal with any of the shenanigans regarding margins or anything like that again. Okay, and let's see. Let's add in a bit more margin, 10 pixels. Awesome. Okay, looking a little bit better. Let's fine tune it. Okay, fine tuning is also really a big part of how you actually get this stuff done. Now, okay, that works. Great. Let's see. What else do we need? The layout for this is a little bit messed up. If you can pay attention just a little bit, right? This text is in line with this text, which is in line with the rest of the text, but the workspaces seem to be a little shifted. That is not fun. So let's go and fix that. Workspaces. See the workspace name. That's good. Let's see what happens if we have icons. Hold on, okay. No, seems like we're just going to have to deal with it and just go. Okay, now finally, Waybar has been customized after quite a while of just tinkering away at it. This is what we have. Looks pretty good, right? Now, if we change Wallhaven's wallpaper that we see over here, okay, let's change it to W5Q this. And what's going to happen is the colors are going to adapt. At least they should. Right now, they don't seem to be working, okay? It still seems to be blue, but we can fix that. Let's see here. So background is supposed to be 1A, okay. Let's go down a troubleshooting rabbit hole perhaps, and let me actually show you why this is not working. So this color should very obviously be red, right? But it isn't red. Now, let's fix the reason why it isn't actually red. So if we go over to Matugen's template section, here we see Waybar, right? So input path is going to be this template. We'll just make sure that the template's right. Config Matugen templates colors.css, open that file. Okay, this works. This is fine, right? Great. Then the output path is of course going to be config waybar colors.css. Now that file has to update. However, there is probably a reason why it's not updating. So let's run the command again, see if it works. Of course, we have to reload the bar, right? I still haven't set up reloading for the bar, and so it's not going to show changes as soon as I run the command. However, we can add that in as a post hook. So post hook basically runs a command right after the Matugen template has been created. Okay, so if I run post hook as pkill waybar and then waybar ampersand, what's going to happen is when I run Matugen, it should, yep, it should reload immediately. And when that happens, we see this absolutely beautiful bar over here. Looks pretty awesome. Now let's change the wallpaper to what it was before. Okay, and that should be YXZ, so on and so forth. And then we get this. Awesome. And again, to make sure that Waybar reloads right after you execute the Matugen command, make sure that you have this post hook command. Okay, so pkill Waybar is just going to process kill Waybar, and then you're going to launch Waybar and then fork it to the background. Fork to the background basically means just send the program to the background and don't have it wait on anything. That's it. To do that, then you should be able to get a Waybar config like this. Great. Now, we're also going to have to, of course, configure Hyperland, Kitty, and Rofi. So let's do that. Hyperland is pretty simple. There should be a colors.conf file in config hyper. So if I go to config hyper, should see a colors.conf over here. Let's open that in one terminal, and then in another terminal, let's open, oops, okay, let's open the main config file for hyper. So config hyper hyperland.conf. Okay, great. Now over here, what we're supposed to do is figure out where the colors are. Here they are. And then we're supposed to substitute them for the colors that we find in this colors.conf file. Right, so what we can do is source our colors.conf file. So it's going to be source equals, okay, dot config hyper colors.conf. Okay, we source that file, then we go over to colors. And then here for the active border, let's not use a gradient, but then instead, what we can do is just use a single color. So perhaps we could use something like inverse primary. So inverse primary over here. We just have to make that a $sign, see what happens. And as you can see, the change is affected and applied immediately. And as for inactive border, we can change that to something like, let's see what we have here. We should have an outline. So outline is a thing that changes it to outline. If we don't want that, let's see. We have outline variant. We can try that out. Outline variant. This should be a variant of outline, which makes it a bit darker and actually seems like it's inactive. Great. Now, the border is not as pronounced as maybe some of you want it to be. And so what you're going to do here is just get rid of that and then make sure that border is something like primary. Now you can actually see the border and have at it. Great. We also have a bunch of different colors. So instead of just using primary or secondary, you can also use tertiary, which gives you this pink color. Okay. So we have primary, secondary, and tertiary, right? Secondary would look something like this. Secondary, it gives you this color, which is basically the same as the workspace color. Works. So we'll keep it as secondary for now so we can actually see the border. And as for the gaps, let's see what we can do about the gaps. So gaps in, let's make it something like 15. Okay, now here, what does it say? Outline set. Okay, this is a bit messed up, so let's change that. Great, and then, okay, good. Now it should work. Great. Now let's make it 15 for gaps inside. Too much. We can have it. Have, meaning literally cut in half. So 7 gaps, like 7 pixels of gap between each window adds up to 15, which is why this looks good. Now for gaps out, we can actually increase it a little bit, but then make it something like 17. It should line up with this, should line up with the bar. Okay, looks pretty good. Awesome. Is there anything else? Let's just reduce the border size. Okay, never mind. That makes it a little bit too thin. So we can keep it at 2. Now for the rounding, yep, you can increase it, but then it ends up looking a bit too round. So we'll keep it at something like 8. And 8 works pretty well. Awesome. Great. Now what we have to do is start configuring. Let's see. So Hyperland's done, Waybar is done. Next we're going to configure Kitty. Configuring Kitty is pretty simple. Again, we have already generated the colors.conf file. So if we go to config Kitty, what we'll find here is basically the colors.conf file. We don't actually have a Kitty config, so that's no problem. We can go ahead and create one. So if we just look for, let's close all of this, right? We look for Kitty config, should find a config file over here. Ta-da. Okay, now there should be an example file that we can copy over. Let's see. Here. Okay, so Control Shift F2. So open Kitty, Control Shift F2, and then it opens the config file, and the config file is actually created. Great. Now for color scheme, let's just go over here. And as for the color scheme, these are all the settings that we have for that, right? That's all well and good. Now we're looking for window padding. So window padding should be somewhere over here. Let's look for padding. Yep, window padding width. I'm going to change that to something like 20. Means next time you open terminal, this is what you see. Great. Okay, it looks pretty good. Then for cursor, we need to change the cursor to something like beam. Instead of beam, actually we'll make it a block. So here, cursor. Gotta look for that. Good to do. Yeah, cursor shape over here. So cursor shape, going to make that block, which should turn it to block. However, if it doesn't, there is a setting over here. Shell integration should be no cursor. So we can just set that here. Shell integration, no dash cursor. And now we get a block cursor. Very nice. Great. Now let's see how to actually import files. However, this seems to be a slight problem. You know, it's not reloading automatically. The whole point of having a theme switcher and whatnot, along with using Matugen, is so that things happen automatically, right? Let's configure it that way. So right now, this is what we see. Even if we open a new terminal, okay, when we open a new terminal, the color scheme is actually applied, but then it's supposed to happen automatically. So let's actually make it automatic. Now, do you see this post hook thing over here? Now, what you're actually supposed to do is add in another post hook for Kitty. So you just have to type in post hook equals, and then we'll just type in a command that we have to type in order to get Kitty to reload every single time the templates are generated from Matugen. So that command is actually going to be kill-sig usr1, okay, pgrep kitty. Now, what is all of this? What is all this voodoo magic? What's actually going on over here? It's actually pretty simple, so you don't have to worry about it too much. Let me explain. So kill is the command that we use in Linux in order to kill a process, right? So it doesn't matter what process it is. You can use kill, and then you can mention a PID or a PID, what we call a process ID, in order to kill that particular process. Great. Now that is how we use kill. Now, what is this $sign syntax and whatever? So basically, what this is doing, this $sign syntax, along with everything else, is it's getting the PID of kitty. So you remember the PID that I just mentioned a second ago? If I type in pgrep kitty, what it's going to do is print all the different PIDs of kitty. So we probably have 4 terminals open. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, probably somewhere else, right? So we have 4 terminals of kitty opened. Great. Okay. Now, what you want to do is basically send the sig user1 signal in order to kill, basically get it to reload. So not actually killing the kitty process. What you're doing is just getting it to reload. And that is done by sending this signal to whichever, basically all kitty terminals. That's it. And once you do that and set that up, what happens, now we can press Ctrl-Shift F5 to actually reload any open kitty windows that we have. Let's say I open a new terminal and then I run the same Matugen image command, except I choose a different wallpaper. Now what's going to happen is the wallpaper should change along with the color scheme of the terminal. So if I press enter, ta-da, as you can see, kitty updates immediately. Great. Now, there seems to be something else. Is this it? Okay, it works. Waybar ampersand. Okay, that also works. Awesome. Great. Now, let's just put in ampersand disown over here because it didn't actually give us back the terminal immediately. And now let's try it. Now, QZW. Okay, now it works perfectly. So the reason why I added this disown command over here is there are two. Okay, look at this. There are 2 types, or there are a couple of different ways you can fork a process to the background in Linux. Okay, so you can either just follow up a command with the ampersand sign, which is going to launch the command and then give you your shell back. However, if you close the terminal, what's going to happen, or if you basically close the terminal that's running the current process, the process is going to die. As you saw, Waybar just died. Now, however, if I don't want that to happen, and instead I want the process to be detached from the terminal, okay, what I'm going to do is type in Waybar, so basically the command name, ampersand disown. Okay, now if I type in ampersand disown, what's going to happen is it's going to disown the process, and so I can kill this terminal completely without any issues. Right now, okay, now all I have to do is just press, super R, the command that we set up earlier, in order to reload the bar, and all we get is 1 bar, right? Now you can take the same principle and apply it to any command or any process that you want to fork to the background. Let's say you want to open Thunar, which is your file manager, but then you don't want it to stay open in the terminal. You want to be able to close the terminal, but then you don't want to use the app launcher for whatever reason, because it's not working, let's say. So you just type in Thunar ampersand disown, hit enter, and what it's going to do is it's going to launch Thunar, and then it's going to disown the process from this terminal, so you can get rid of this terminal just fine and still be able to use your file manager, no problem. That is exactly why we use disown. Great. Now we have Kitty working, we have Waybar working, we've got Hyperland working as well. And you know what? Just for the sake of conformity, or just to keep things a bit uniform, let's actually put in a hyperctl reload over here. It's not actually necessary, but then it keeps things looking uniform and then pretty nice and sweet. Great. Now this is what we've got going on. We've configured Waybar, Kitty, and Hyperland so far. As you can see, it looks pretty good. Okay, now we still have a couple of different things to do as far as configuring Kitty goes. So that's going to be reducing the background opacity, and then let's see what else. Basically adding blur to it. So we have a couple more things to do. Almost done with configuring Kitty, so let's do that. Go to config kitty, kitty.conf. Here you want to look for opacity. Okay, just look for background opacity. You want to turn that to something like 0.8, 0.8, and now if you reload, what's going to happen is you're going to be able to see the background. Very nice. Now Hyperland has a blur effect by default, but it's not quite the same as cranking the blur effect higher. It's basically giving you translucent windows, right? Translucent windows, but then you don't quite see the blur. Now we're going to fix that, but apart from that, let's see what else we've got. Now you're pretty sure you saw this setting over here, scroll back indicator opacity. Change this to 0. Trust me when I say this scroll bar that you see over here, right? Let's say I run a bunch of commands. Let's say I just run ls or q, or rather pacman-q, and it's going to list a bunch of different, packages. Now, do you see this scroll bar over here? This doesn't look really pretty because in Alacrity, what happens is you're not going to see the scroll bar, and that makes it much easier and just makes it look prettier whenever you're, let's say, running a fetch program. Let's say you're running niche, for example. Now, what you're going to want to do when you're showcasing your ICE is basically just package it up like this, right? You don't want the terminal prompt to be seen generally, and so this is what you're going to do. Just shift it so that the only thing you can see is the fetch. However, this freaking scroll bar makes it look much uglier for no reason. So you just want to change it to 0.0. When you change scroll back indicator opacity, technically it's supposed to just make it invisible. So it's worth a try, right? Now let's type in pacman-q again. And as you can see, it's disappeared. So now you get the best of both worlds. You're able to get Kitty's beautiful font rendering, as I've explained in one of my other videos, why Kitty's font rendering is just superior, because it looks more like a Max, right? And not just that, but then you're able to run fetch programs like this, where you're not seeing that ugly ass scroll bar anymore, and all you're seeing is just your fetch program, like this. Looks pretty sweet. Awesome. Now that should be everything for Kitty. We've configured Kitty. Now what else do we have? Next thing is going to be Rofi. Right now, we are using Wofi. We don't want to use Wofi. Instead, we want to use Rofi. Now, Rofi has Wayland, of course, and okay, never mind. We've got blur to configure, right? Config hyperland.conf. Let's just go to blur. And here you can change the size of the blur. We can make it something like 10, increase the number of passes. Ta-da. Now you get this pretty cool blur effect. Awesome. Okay, now onto Rofi. Now, of course, to install Rofi, you're just going to have to type in yay-s if you've installed a AWR helper. Otherwise, you're going to have to use pacman, right? Just install Rofi. You used to have to install Rofi-Wayland, but Rofi now has built-in Wayland support, so that's nice. Once you install Rofi, you want to just clone this repo. So let's actually go over to this site. It's Adi1090x Rofi, right? Just look that up. Once you're over here, just click on this link. Once you click on this link, you'll see that it's a huge collection of Rofi-based custom applets, launchers, and power menus. Scroll down over here, and first you're going to want to clone it, right? Here, we have a couple of different options. Well, it's mostly one option, but regardless, this is what you see. So we're git cloning a repository. So in case you're not familiar with Git is basically a version control system. It allows you to store different versions of your programs in one place so that if anything breaks, you're able to roll back and revert to whatever version of the program that you had before. Now that is Git. It's a version control system. Now this version control system allows you to clone what we call repositories, like this Rofi. Okay, this Rofi website basically on GitHub is a repository. So it allows you to clone repositories to your local machine. Now that's what we're doing here with git clone. Now we are adding the --depth equals 1 option. We're using the depth option to basically clone only the surface level stuff and not any of the history, because we don't want any of the history, and this version of this repository actually works and has everything that we could possibly need in terms of customizing Rofi. So all we're going to need is just this depth equals 1, because we only want this version that you're seeing over here. You don't want any of the history, right? You don't want any of the 122 commits to be pulled to your machine so that you can roll back to it. You don't want that, which is why you only want this. So with that being said, you just click enter, you hit enter, and then it's going to clone it. Till then, we have a couple of different themes that we can choose from, right? So if you click on previews, below that we have a drop down, right? For type 1, if I zoom in over here, this is style 1, style 2, style 3, and so on and so forth, right? We've got a bunch of different styles. Now, you are supposed to pick whichever style that you like the most and then use that. I'll show you exactly how to install this and then configure it with Matugen. But first, what you should do is figure out which style you actually want. So, okay, that's done. Now just look through all of these types, figure out which one you like the most. Then once you figured that out, just go over to your terminal, cd into Rofi, okay, list. This is all that we've got. Now, the one I'm going to be picking is going to be style 9. Style 9 looks pretty good and would look pretty good with Matugen configured with it, right? So what we're going to do is basically pick style 9. Now, you want to, it's ls-l so you can see it clearer. Go into files. In files, you want to go into launchers. Then in launchers, type 1. I'm picking type 1 style 9. Okay, type 1 style 9 is my thing. Great. Now, you also want to make a .config Rofi directory. Now, I've already made this directory. If I cd into .config Rofi, as you can see, we have the colors.rc file, right? No problem. Let that be there. We're going to tweak it in just a moment, but we need this folder. And inside of this folder, what we're going to do is copy over launcher.sh, okay, cp-r, which means recursive. Recursive option is basically used whenever you have a folder, so you want to copy the folder as well as the contents of that folder to any particular destination. That's what we're doing here. So you want to copy launcher.sh, then you want shared because this shared folder contains colors and fonts, which we're going to have to alter a little bit. Okay, so you want to copy launcher.sh, then shared, and you also want to get style9.rc. You want to get this stuff, and then you want to put it inside of home/.config Rofi. So you put it over there, and now what's going to happen is, ta-da, we have all of this stuff over here. Now, let's see, let's close this, and let's actually go into config Rofi. Here we are. Now, there's a couple of things that we have to do. First of all, we have to open this launcher.sh script, okay? Now here, you want to change the theme. So the directory, yes, this is going to be the appropriate directory. It works, right? This is where the directory actually is. Now, you're probably not going to be using these comments or any of it at all, so you can get rid of that. And make sure to keep the shebang line because you actually need that. Okay, but anyway, choose the theme to be style 9, directory to be type 1, and then that's it. So what it's going to do is launch it properly. Now, if we type in /launcher, of course, it fails because there's no such directory. Let's fix that. So inside launchers type 1, we need to make directory -p. The -p option is basically going to create multiple directories if they're missing. So launchers, right? Let's see. It was called launchers type 1. Launchers type 1. We want to make any missing directories. Okay, and we have to move launcher.sh. Okay, launcher.sh, then shared and style 9 into launchers /type 1. Okay, type 1. Move that into there. Now, if we just type in tree, which is a command you can install, by the way, here you see colors.rc, and then inside launchers you have type 1. Inside type 1 you have launcher.sh, shared, and style 9. Perfect. Now you want to go into launchers, type 1. Now what you want to do is just attempt to launch the script again. And as you can see, it works. Now this looks like an absolute beauty because the only thing that we have to fix is the colors not working. And the fonts, of course. So first, let's actually change the fonts. Let's go over here. First, get rid of the comments. And now, let's change the font from JetBrains Mono to SF Pro Display 10. Do that, and then inside Shared, let's open Colors. And here, we seem to be importing a couple of different colors that are actually not here. Now, how do we fix this? That's a really good question. Let's change this, first of all, to colors.rc. Or if you wanted, you can name it as matugen.rc. Okay, maybe to make it a little bit different and for it to make sense. Now, if you're sure that you're only going to be using Matugen with this setup and then nothing else, you can of course name it colors.rc in order to keep it uniform with the rest of whatever we've got going on over here. However, if you don't want that, you can instead keep it as Matugen. Now, for the sake of uniformity, I'm going to keep it as colors.rc. Okay, great. And also don't forget to leave a line at the end of the file, leave a blank line. There's a whole other reason as to why you're supposed to leave this blank line. You can go and look it up, but just for convention, and to keep the code readable and fun and nice, just leave a blank line at the end of the file. Great. So config Rofi colors.rc. Great. Now let's cd // run Rofi, make the colors folder. Hold on. Let's go back. Launchers type 1. shared colors. So it's supposed to be, okay, got it. Here, config Rofi colors. So make a directory called colors, move colors.rossi inside of colors. Great. Now, what we're actually supposed to do is take a look at what that one dark file looks like. Okay, now let's actually, we can look it up right here. So click on files, this link. Never mind, it's way too slow. So let's actually just use Thunart for this. So let's go to Rofi, files, launchers, type 1, or actually go back. Want to look at colors. Here we're taking one dark. So let's open it with this, and this is the template that we're supposed to give Matugen in order to generate the colors. Why are we supposed to give this instead of just having Matugen generate colors normally with the normal template? Well, that is a really good question. Because if I show you what colors it's actually expecting, so if I go into, let's just use this, right? NVim, launchers, type 1, here, style 9. These are the colors that it is expecting. So as you can see, we're using all of these colors. Actually, to show it to you even better, we can just go to, yeah, just trust me on this, okay? You don't even have to, you can verify it yourself. But basically, this is the template that we're going to have to use because Matugen's colors look extremely, extremely different and contrary to what you might see otherwise. You go to config, Matugen, templates, Rofi colors.rossi. As you can see, this is what we see over here. There's no background, there's no selected, there's no active, urgent, none of that. Instead, what we have got going on is probably quite a lot of different colors, right? So we have primary, primary fixed, and then primary fixed dim. Now, unless you actually mod the entirety of the theme file itself, unless you mod the style itself in order to fit Matugen's colors, which is not a good idea, because in case you want to change into a custom theme switcher where you're basically installing your own themes, you're configuring and setting up your own themes, sim linking and all that stuff. And by the way, if you want to know how to do that, of course, you can click the first link in the description. I show you exactly how to do that, along with the sim linking and making custom theme switchers and tying a Matugen setup like this one, along with the custom theme switcher, so you can use both depending on how you feel. So if you want to know how to do something like that, go ahead and click the first link in the description. I teach you exactly how to do it. But yeah, you're not going to be able to switch themes, and you're just going to be locked into Matugen if you modify the template file. Not the template, but rather the style file. So don't do that. Instead, what you want to do is go over to this templates file and make sure that you delete all of this. So first of all, hold on. Let's copy this, copy, and then paste. Copy, paste. Now here, what we're supposed to do, because this is a template file and uses Jinja 2 syntax, all we have to do is just look for the surface color, copy this, and then paste it. Copy, and then paste. Paste like so. That's it. Now, we have to do the same for all the other colors. So for background alt, we can pick something like surface, yeah, on surface or surface variant. Let's see. We have inverse surface, inverse on surface. You can pick one of these as well. So let's pick something like surface dim instead. So this would be, paste this here, colors.surface, let's see, surface underscore dim, default.hex, surface underscore dim. Great. Now for foreground, that's going to be our primary color. So just paste the same thing over here. Instead of surface, you want it to be primary. Just make sure that, yep, that is exactly it. And selected, you can make it secondary. Instead of surface, this will be secondary. Then active is going to be any color that you pick. You can make it tertiary. Hold on. No, foreground is, my bad. It's not supposed to be primary. It's supposed to be on underscore surface. On surface, right? Text color, on surface, on surface, on underscore surface. Selected is going to be primary. Selected is primary. Active can be secondary. And then urgent is going to be on error. Urgent is on underscore error. So if we look for error, error or on error. Never mind, it's supposed to be error because on error is actually the text color that you see on the error. So it's just supposed to be error. Error is red. And so this is all we need. Then we eliminate the rest of the colors that were there originally, and that's it. Now we need to go inside of here. Need to go inside of here, and this is the template file, correct? The output path is going to be config Rofi colors.rc. Now what happens is, of course, nothing, because we still have to go to Hyperland's config and change it over there. So config hyperland.conf. Now here, what we should actually do is scroll down and find our binds. So under keybinds, you want to remove wafi-show drun. This was probably saying menu before. I changed it, right? So you want to remove this and then add in a toggle functionality with kill Rofi, and then put in these two bars over here, and then pass in Rofi-show drun, like so. Now, this is what we see. Great. But the theme is not working. Well, that is exactly why we shouldn't put in Rofi-show drun, but instead we should just run this script. That would be .config Rofi launchers type 1 launcher.sh. So if we type that instead, this is what we see. So the font is changed, but the colors are still missing. No problem, that's extremely simple to fix. And in case you're wondering what this pkill Rofi and these two pipes are about, it's basically to act as a toggle, right? So what happens is when you execute Rofi, you get this, right? You see this window. Now, what this is actually doing is, first, this command is trying to kill Rofi. Now, if that fails, it's going to execute the Rofi command. But if the Rofi command is already running, which means a PID can be obtained, then Rofi is going to die. Now this allows you to basically use the same key in order to launch Rofi again and again instead of having to press escape each time. Because as you saw earlier, if I try to launch Rofi again and again, it would basically launch 2 or 3 windows instead of toggling it. We don't want that, so which is why we're going to do this instead. Great, now we have done that. Let's see what else we have to do. So we've got this configured. Now the only thing is basically getting the colors to work. Why are the colors not working? Well, pretty simple to troubleshoot, right? Go to config Rofi launchers type 1. In here, you just go to style 9, see why it's actually not working. Okay, let's go into shared colors. Now here, config Rofi colors.rc. Okay, of course, we haven't generated the template file yet, which is why it's complaining and barking at us. Anyway, if we just go to Matugen image and then actually generate template, we should be good. So Wallhaven, say W5Q. Ta-da! And now, as you can see, it works flawlessly. Awesome. There's just one thing that we have to do. If we open this style 9 thing, all we have to do is just add in a little bit of space after each of these icons. And then what's going to happen is, as you can see, it works. It looks brilliant, just genuinely brilliant. So let's write the changes. As you can see here, it works amazingly. Just have to adjust icon spacing to get it all to line up. So SSH done. Let's see. Okay, SSH needs a bit more space here. Okay, let's add one more. See if it works. Ta-da. Okay, works. Everything's lined up. Now for the search icon, should be right here. We look for it, we see search. So I just want to add a space there. Ta-da. And that is pretty much it. That is how you configure Rofi. Now, we still have one last thing left to do, right? Which is automating all of this into a single command, because typing Matugen image, and then the entirety of it is going to be way too cumbersome. So we're going to automate this by making our own command. So what we're going to do here is just create a directory called config. Okay, so config, not config actually. It's going to be in local/bin. So you want to make a directory .local/bin, and you want to go into .localbin. Now in here, what you want to do is just type in, let's see, what do we type in over here? Okay, you just have to name your theme switcher, the app that you're going to use, the command that you're going to use in order to switch Matugen themes. You just have to name it something. Now, I've always called mine wallset. Looks pretty nice. So you can call yours whatever that you want. So I'm calling mine wallset. And here, what we're going to do is, of course, as any good old shell script, we're going to add in shebang bin bash using the bash shell interpreter for this script. Now, what we're doing here is basically getting the argument, right? The first argument inside of image. We're putting that inside of this image variable. And all we're doing is just calling Matugen image and then passing in the image. That's it. There's nothing else. If you want, you can put in quotes over here. Ta-da. Now, apart from that, that should be it. If we type in wall set, of course, it's not going to work, right? We just have to type in chmod plus x wall set. And now, if we type in /wall set, what's going to happen is it's going to work. But of course, we didn't pass it anything, so it's going to fail, right? However, if we give it a wallpaper from pictures, wallpapers, Wallhaven, let's see, YXZ. As you can see, it works just as well. Now, there's still a couple of things that we have to do. And note, you don't actually have to name a shell script with .sh. You can just leave it blank and it's still going to understand. The Linux kernel, or rather the shell, is going to understand that this is a shell script and then execute it accordingly because of the shebang line that we have over here. Now, we also want to just completely eliminate any output because we don't want to see any output. So the way that you can do that is with /dev/null. 2 major than &1, 2 major than, &1 /dev/null, something like this, right? Hold on. Actually, you know what? Let's look this up. So output redirection is pretty simple. All we have to do is just, okay, so all you're looking up is how to suppress output in shell. Should be one line here. Let's see. Yes, this. So ampersand and then greater than should suppress all output. Now, if we type in /wall set, then just go to the home directory, pictures, wallpapers, Wallhaven, QZW. As you can see, all output is suppressed and you don't see any errors. Great. Now, using / every single time is quite a bit cumbersome. And so what we're going to do is add this directory to path so that we can type in wall set no matter which directory we're in without having to use the / and still have it execute. Pretty simple way to do that. You just have to go to your bashrc file. And here you have to export this path variable. So you want to export path /home/user3.local bin : $path. So you just have to export this, just add in this line, copy this line, put it inside your bashrc. Then you want to source.bashrc, quit all of your terminal windows, make sure nothing's open. And now if you run wall set, it's not going to run anything. Well, because one, we didn't pass it anything. There's a lot more you can do with this script, like handling errors and then spitting back at you, whether you're actually passing it the proper kind of argument or not. You can do all sorts of stuff with the script, but in order to keep it pretty simple, because it's likely not going to be abused that much, we can just keep it 1 or 2 commands and just pass in the proper wallpaper and then have it switch the wallpaper for us. So if I put in QZW again, turns out to be the same wallpaper. How nice. W5Q, come on. There you go. It works. And this is what we have. Now there's one final tweak that you probably would like to make as well, which is the Waybar config. So config Waybar style.css. You scroll down over here, you should see, that, okay, so this looks very pill style and then it looks very nice and appealing. However, yeah, this chip, but the width of all these other, modules is not quite the same. So let's make that a little better. The modules we're looking to change are going to be pulse audio. In terms of the padding, you want to make it something like 7 pixels. Maybe not 7, but 8 pixels. See if that helps. Okay, it helps a lot. But maybe you want it to be 10 pixels. Okay, works. Now, in order to know how much padding this thing actually needs, you can do that. Okay, works. Awesome. And that's for pulse audio. Then for battery, you want to reduce the padding just a little bit more. Maybe you want to make the padding 9 pixels just to test and iterate. Okay, not everywhere, just for left and right sides. Okay, works. 9 pixels looks amazing. Let's make it 8, see if it looks better. Okay, 8 also looks really good. Now for network, can change it to something like 12 by default, and that works. Great. See if we make it 11. Okay, perfect. Now we have actual pill style modules, as you can see over here, and this is what we've got. Now at this point, we're basically done. Like there is nothing else to do. But I'm going to give you a little bonus and then show you how to configure your GTK theme as well. We open NWG look, as you can see, we're missing quite a bunch of GTK stuff. We can use Matugen to theme GTK, of course, but that is going to be for a different video, right? Here, we've themed the basics of our setup using Matugen, and it looks pretty good. If you want to know how to actually theme Matugen with your GTK theme and your mouse cursor, hell, you probably could even do it with your mouse cursor. For Qt apps and everything else, you can go ahead and click the first link in the description. I show you exactly how to do it for GTK, this, that, and the other, pretty much getting the entirety of your setup to work with your wallpaper, which is pretty damn beautiful, right? And not to mention, I show you how to make custom theme switches as well. So not just using in wall set over here in order to set the command, set the wallpaper, and then have everything change accordingly. I show you how to make the menu that you saw earlier, probably in one of my previous videos, where you can pick between a list of your own themes, right? Rose, pine, and everything. You can pick between a list of those themes and then have, your computer switch to those themes. Not just that, but then also combine that with Matugen as well. So there's a lot of stuff that basically you learn in the program. So go ahead, click the first link in the description, check it out, and that's that. Now, as for configuring GTK themes, let's see what we've got. You can just select ADW GTK3 dark. Now, if you want to actually install that, just type in ADW GTK3. You should find your, actually, should be a GTK theme. Here, yeah, here it is, ADW GTK theme. That's it. So it's unofficial GTK port 3 port of the Libet White theme. Right now, I don't have this installed. It's probably something else that I have installed, but regardless, this is what we have, right? So just select ADW GTK3 dark after installing that. Once you do that, just pick whichever font you want, select prefer dark here, choose whichever font you like. Advaita Sans actually looks pretty good these days, right? You can hit apply. The icon theme, you can use Papyrus Dark. Papyrus Dark looks pretty good. Now, if I show you how to install that, it's just going to be Papyrus icon theme. Okay, here you see Papyrus icon theme, that's installed. All you have to do is close and reopen NWG look, and you're going to find this. And by the way, this tool is actually called NWG look. Here you should find it, right? NWG look is a GTK settings editor adapted to work on WL roots based compositors, which Hyperland is. So here you just want to select Adwaita, hit apply. I've installed this macOS cursor separately, so if you want it, you can get that as well. It's installed with Apple cursor, if I'm not wrong. Apple_cursor. Yep, open source macOS cursors. This is the cursor that I use in all of my previous videos. So if you want that, you can just select that. Hit apply. Here it's not going to work. If you actually want, hold up. Yeah. So if you want this type of cursor, you're going to have to go into your Hyperland config hyperland.conf. To go into there and go to the auto start section. Here you see auto start, and then you have to exec once hyperctl set cursor macOS 24 or 30, depending on the cursor size that you want. So that would be hyperctl set cursor macOS 24. And now my cursor changes, or at least it's supposed to change. Okay, let's see here. If it doesn't change, it's probably just missing the icon in the right place, but no problem. I've also made a video on how you can configure cursors, so you can just go and check that out. Okay, and let's see, what else do we have apart from the cursors and the GTK themes? Icon theme, mouse cursor, then font. Okay, the font, of course. Font hinting, we want to set that to slight. Hinting is basically the addition of slight mathematical instructions at the edges of the fonts in order to make it look a little bit beefier, if you will. Okay, so you can make that slight. If you add too much font hinting, and if your font actually isn't built right, what's going to happen is you'll start seeing purpley stuff. You'll start seeing purpley stuff at the edges of the fonts, what we call fringing. Now, fringing doesn't look very pretty no matter what screen you're on. So unless you prefer fringing for whatever reason, just set font hinting to slight and change the anti-aliasing to RGBA because that's mostly what all of our displays are using. Now, if I close and just reopen, as you can see, with just immediately with that one change, everything changes. As in, the font rendering of Rofi just got 10 times better. Now, if I open NWG look, here it looks laser sharp. Like it's really sharp, right? That's for the font. Let's see if we have anything else. Nope, that pretty much seems to be it. Okay, and of course we can customize this prompt as well, which I've made a specific video on that goes into it in much more detail, so you can check that out as well. And it should be it. If you want to know how to make something like this, along with the Rofi menu that goes along with this setup, which I actually show you how to make in the program, Hyper Accelerator, which is the first link in the description, then go ahead, check it out. I show you how to make that along with the other custom theme switcher stuff as well. So if you want to know more about that and how to actually make it without having to break your head, because I pretty much held your hand here, be honest, right? Without having to do all the troubleshooting that I actually went through originally in order to make setups like these, if you want to know how to do that, skip through all the hassle, just get to the good stuff, avoid all the bad stuff, go ahead, click the first link in the description. And of course, if you liked the video, hit like. If you loved it and want to see more like this in your feed, hit subscribe, and I will see you next time. Stay rising.